I would say that's the hardest part about working for parole. It's walking that line. You're focusing on the social work aspect and trying to help those individuals make the change. By the same token, when you have that individual that's crossed that line, and now it's time to focus in on the protection of the community, you have to put on a law enforcement hat, and that means being willing and able to go out there, chase that individual down after all other recourses have been explored, take him back into custody, and again, always remember that our primary concern is making sure that the community is, at large is safe.
The 67 state prisons in New York house more than 70,000 inmates. There are nearly that many released inmates on the city streets today, 60,000 of them. Every year, as many as 17,000 prisoners, over 20% of those incarcerated, are paroled from penitentiaries ranging from work-release facilities to maximum security prisons. These inmates are granted their freedom only after the approval of a parole board or through what is known as a conditional release. Conditional release is automatically granted to inmates who have served 85% of the indeterminate sentence that was given to them at the time of imprisonment. Who watches over these parolees? Only one peace officer for every 40 released prisoners. Brooklyn's Metro 2 Parole Office currently supervises some 17,000 parolees and is home to the city's TOP and SOU units. TOP, short for Targeted Offender Program, is a group of highly trained parole officers whose shortened caseloads consist of parolees who are at high risk for returning to a life of crime. Officers of the Special Offenders Unit, or SOU, supervise some of New York's most heinous paroled criminals, from cop killers to rapists and pedophiles. Besides having multiple degrees in psychology and sociology, every New York parole officer must go through various weapons and tactics training in order to ensure public safety in the event that a parolee decides to break the conditions of parole supervision.
I've been a parole officer for about 7 years now, and the interesting thing about this job is that no one case is ever the same to any other. One case that comes to mind for me is Fred Banks. Here's a guy who's been in and out of jail most of his life, and he comes out to parole supervision to be supervised by me. I see him on his initial arrival report, and then I never see him again. And consequently, I took a urine on that day and it came back dirty. When I find out about him again, it's because he's been rearrested and is incarcerated at another facility. So like I said, with Fred Banks, he's not an exception. It happens. It happens a lot.
This would be the first and last time our film crew or his parole officer would see Fred Banks. Just 3 weeks after his arrival report, Banks was arrested for a new crime in Jersey City, New Jersey, and was sent back to Rikers Island to finish his sentence. Once reincarcerated, Fred Banks would refuse any further interviews. Parole's Metro 2 division is conducting what is known as Safety Day, when every parolee who comes in for their routine office report will be searched for weapons, drugs, and any other items considered parole violations. Over the years that parole has conducted this type of search, they have confiscated numerous guns, knives, and illicit drugs. Today's search will be no different. It will yield several arrests by day's end, along with a troubling and gruesome discovery. A parolee who was recently released after serving 15 years for a murder charge was searched and found to be in possession of multiple empty crack vials and what is believed to be the bone of the man he was accused of killing. These results are perhaps an indication of the uphill battle that every parole officer faces in their attempt to safely reintegrate parolees back into society. The reintegration process is rarely smooth. This morning, Sergeant Terry Pelusco of the NYPD goes over the details on a warrant that was developed by Parole and the top unit for 2 parolees allegedly dealing crack cocaine from their apartment. Parole, along with the NYPD and an emergency services unit entry team, sets out for the location to issue the warrant.
Information's been received that not only do we expect to find the drugs, but also there is a handgun that has been seen on several occasions. So the emergency service unit will go in, they'll make entry, we'll follow them in and do a search, and hopefully be able to recover the weapon as well as the drugs.
Although ESU quickly gains entry and secures the apartment, the situation changes significantly. Information had called for only 2 suspects to be at the location. Yet when ESU breaches the door, they discover 12 people, 4 adults, and 8 children ranging in age from 16 months to 17 years. The officers begin to sort out those involved by taking down everyone's information, including the children's.
Is that Robles also?
The original suspects are then handcuffed and taken to transport vehicles waiting outside. After carefully questioning the parents and the older children, the officers help the family gather a few of their belongings before escorting them from the apartment.
Hey, brother, all right, man?
Once the apartment is cleared, the officers begin their search for the suspected drugs and weapons. It does not take long for the officers to discover a loaded handgun hidden under clothing in the bathroom. Upon closer inspection, the officer who discovered the weapon notices that the serial numbers have been removed from the gun, a process known as defacing.
All right, boys.
That's not yours. Yeah, pleasure.
From today's search warrant, we got a loaded .380 with 2 rounds in a clip. None in the chamber. It was in the bathroom. They must have threw it when we came up to hit the apartment door. That's all we got. There you go.
Back at the 75th precinct, the 2 suspects are charged with possession of an illegally defaced handgun and are brought into holding cells for later processing. Today, our film crew meets with 2 parolees who have been out of jail for some time. Taeno Rivera has been on parole for 2.5 years after serving 17 years in Attica State Prison for 3 counts of involuntary manslaughter.
At 4 o'clock in the morning, the people that I had the problem with, they was waiting for me outside with baseball bat and knife, and and one thing led to another, and I had a gun. It was a gun placed in my hand by one of my friends, and I started shooting down. They gave me 8 and 30 to 25. 8 and 30 to 25, but I wound up serving because of my behavior. I served 17 years straight. It was not easy, but I made it. Believe me, because there, when you're trying to do the good, it's when it's the worst time for you. That's when everybody try to tax you and everything. I think the parole should always stay. I need it, because even though if they ask me personally, I will say, no, I don't want parole, right? Because I want to be free. But the parole is needed because right now, you could say it's like a leech. If you let us go, what happens is that everybody will go crazy. If we locked up so long and they let us go without parole, we come out here, we don't know this world. So we go probably do worse than what we did or whatever. But when we got parole put us in line. They check on us. They give us an idea of what the world had became. We need this program of parole. I think they're helping me a lot. These 2 years that I have done outside, 2.5 years, it's been because they help. They've been patient. They've been like a counselor. They've been everything to me. So I owe them a lot.
The other parolee has refused to reveal his identity. After serving 12 years for the rape and sodomy of his 8-year-old daughter, he has been on parole for 4 years.
There's a lot of emotional turmoil that's still roiling around that I haven't really resolved. They had a professional doctor walk in and say, well, there's no damage, but it could have happened. That's what he said. No physical evidence of any sort, no DNA, none of that. My daughter, she gets up there and she uses words like penis and anus and breast, and that she had been coached. The district attorney, assistant district attorney, forgive me, was able to convince the jury that just something must have happened. It just had to have happened, okay? And that jury went for that. Most guys in prison can be proud of what they've done because they've got other guys around them who have done more or less the same thing. Guys who sex offenses, they've got to hide it because that's the one crime, just about the only crime, that the other guys will not approve of and will, you know, like really savage you if they find out that you've been doing it. Murderers get more respect in this country and in the culture than the sex offenders do. And yet they've taken human life. Most of the people who are convicted of sex offense, let's face it, they didn't kill anybody. May have created trauma, but they did not kill. The one male involved in the entire charges, they continued to persecute him because it had to be he did something wrong. Sure, it's always the man, right?
Returning parole violators to prison is part of the process. But for every parolee who is sent back, there are 10 inmates who are released to parole supervision. This afternoon, 2 TOPS parole officers have received information regarding 2 inmates who are set to be conditionally released to parole supervision and will be assigned to their caseload in just a few weeks.
I just received information from my senior that I would be getting inmate Ramayama Jones on my caseload.
A community prep case that I've received is someone who's still incarcerated inside prison, and this person's name is Mr. Charles Carter.
Ramayama will also be placed on a curfew from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. Sunday through Saturday.
Basically, what has to be done at this point is I have to review the case prior to making a home visit to the household. He proposed to live with at a residence with his parents, his father and his stepmother.
Our film crew was granted permission to interview 2 inmates on the verge of parole. At the time of our interview, Ramayana Jones was currently serving his final weeks of a 6.5-year sentence at Mohawk Correctional Facility, a prison in upstate New York. Charles Carter was serving his final days of a 4.5-year sentence in Queensboro Correctional Facility, a prison in Long Island City, Queens.
I'm 30 years old. I've been incarcerated 6.5 years, and also I've seen a lot of things and felt a lot of unwanted feelings.
I was arrested in 90, and my son was born in 91. I was on Rikers Island. My son was born, and I was basically, altogether, I gave the system 9.5 years.
When I was a kid, I was a thief. I used to rob places. The streets was my home.
I was supposed to an eviction, and things really escalated, you know. Things got escalated, and I wound up, I felt fear for my life, whatever, and I shot 2 dogs.
Well, my mother was a heroin addict. She was a heroin addict since she was 18, since 1969.
I've been in the system since I've been 16.
My father was murdered robbing a bank in 69, 70.
Life is basically what you make it. You know, you can go a wrong route, you can go the right route. You know, it's basically up to the individual. It's not the parents' fault, you know. It's basically all to the individual, you know, what that individual chooses to do with his life.
If I can be a deterrent to anybody, a child, or mainly a child, to tell them, yo, you don't want to be in the penitentiary. You don't want to even go to central booking.
They say I'm the hardest parole officer in New York State Division of Parole. I don't know. I'm just not taking no crap from these guys. I give them a little speech when they come in. I could be your best friend or your worst enemy. It's your choice. But I've been in a specialized unit since 1992. When I perform this job on a daily basis, I'm not a female anymore, I'm an officer. We keep this city together. Parole officers keep this city together. But basically, our main goal is to keep the community safe, right? And try to reintegrate these guys back into society. It's a hard job. It's a very hard job.
With a full day ahead of her, parole officer Sandra Sutherland will take the time to discuss the conditions of parole with the parents of Charles Carter to ensure that they are well aware of all the rules and regulations that will be given to their 26-year-old son prior to his release on May 10th.
Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Carter. My name is Parole Officer Sutherland. I spoke to you earlier on in the week to advise you that I was going to be able to do a community prep visit in reference to your son, Charles Carter, who's due
A
to...
community prep case is conducted for every inmate released to parole supervision. It is vital to ensure that parolees have a safe residential environment for reintegration into society.
Based on his maximum expiration date, he should be staying with me for the whole duration of time he's on parole. Hopefully this will be his last time to be in prison. Okay?
I hope so.
I'm gonna give you a call too.
If at any time a parole officer deems the residence an unsuitable environment, the PO has the jurisdiction to remove the parolee from that residence and move them to a more suitable environment.
Time for him to get on with his life. All right. Everything else is...
I say that 18 years ago.
Everything else is fine? You understand everything?
Yes, I do.
No other questions you have for me?
No, that's about it.
Okay. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
It's been a pleasure.
Both Ramayana Jones and Charles Carter have spent over a decade of their lives behind bars for crimes they have committed. What these two inmates have in common is that they have both previously violated parole and are again being conditionally released to parole supervision. Each inmate was arrested for committing a new crime, which automatically returned him to prison. This will be a second chance at freedom for both, and although their case history is hauntingly familiar, their personal lives are worlds apart. Charles Carter, now a father of two, will be returning to his parents' home in Brooklyn. Ramayana Jones, whose parents are deceased and whose original plans were to live with his sister, must instead return to a shelter for men. Will they successfully reintegrate themselves back into society and complete their parole supervision? Or will they simply return to what is an already overcrowded prison system? Today, both Charles Carter and Ramayana Jones have taken their first step toward freedom. Both have adhered to the first rule and regulation of parole supervision, which is reporting to their assigned parole